Sir, stop right there. You don't have a badge visible.
I'm walking into my hospital. I work here 17 years.
I need you to step back to the curb.
On what basis?
Don't make basis difficult.
On what basis are you detaining me?
Hey!
At 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October in the city of Columbus, Ohio, a man was thrown to the ground in front of the hospital he had run for 6 years. Thai Dr. Marcus Elijah Webb was 51 years old when it happened. He had been awake since 4:15 that morning, not because he had to be, but because he always was. His wife Diane, a high school biology teacher with a laugh that had not changed in 23 years of marriage, had long ago stopped setting an alarm. She said sleeping next to Marcus was like sleeping next to a man who had made a private agreement with the sun. He was simply up before the world asked him to be. That morning, he made coffee, the same way he always did, 2 scoops of dark roast, a small pour of oat milk he would never publicly admit to, and stood at the kitchen window of their house in Bexley, all watching the yard go from black to gray to the particular amber that Columbus produces in October when the maples are doing what maples do. He had lived in that house for 11 years. He knew every tree. He reviewed a surgical schedule on his tablet. He had a 9 a.m. resection, a 58-year-old elementary school principal named David Okonkwo, with a stage 2 pancreatic mass that Marcus had caught earlier than anyone had expected to catch it. And he had already reviewed the imaging 3 times. He reviewed it a 4th time over his coffee. He checked in with his chief resident via text at 5:30. He answered 2 administrative emails about the new Trauma Bay expansion. He reread a letter from a medical student in Lagos who wanted to do a fellowship rotation under his supervision. He wrote back a personal response, 4 paragraphs, and spent 11 minutes on it. At 6:20, he dressed, navy trousers, a pale blue Oxford, and his white coat already waiting in his office. He did not wear his ID badge clipped to his civilian clothes. No physician at Alderman Medical Center did. It was a personal safety measure for staff who commuted, a policy he himself had helped formalize 3 years earlier to protect physicians from being identified as high-income targets on public transit. He drove his own car, a 2019 Subaru Outback with 74,000 miles and a cracked rear bumper he kept meaning to fix. He listened to WVXU, or the NPR affiliate. There was a story about a federal infrastructure bill. He thought briefly about what it might mean for hospital construction grants. He turned into the Alderman Medical Center physician parking structure at 6:41 a.m. and walked toward the main entrance. He was thinking about David Okonkwo's pancreas. Marcus Webb had grown up in East Cleveland, the second of 3 children born to Raymond Webb, a postal carrier for 31 years. Anne Gloria Webb, a certified nursing assistant who worked double shifts at a long-term care facility every other weekend, without complaint for 2 decades. His parents did not attend college. They believed in it the way some families believe in a place they have heard described but never visited, with an almost religious conviction that it existed and that it mattered. Marcus was accepted to Case Western Reserve at 17 on a full academic scholarship. He completed his undergraduate degree in 3 years. He was admitted to the Ohio State University College of Medicine at 20. He was chief resident in cardiothoracic surgery at 29. He was named attending at 31. He published 47 peer-reviewed articles over the course of his career. He developed a modified approach to minimally invasive mitral valve repair that now bears a secondary citation in 2 major surgical textbooks. He trained over 60 surgeons, several of whom now run departments of their own. Yes, he became chief of surgery at Alderman Medical Center at 45, the first black physician to hold that title in the hospital's 91-year history. He was not the kind of man who led with his resume. He was, by all accounts, remarkably quiet about what he had accomplished. His one stated life principle, which he had written in a card to each of his graduating residents for 15 years, it was this: the patient in the room is the only credential that matters. He had a daughter named Imani, 22, a second-year law student at Howard. He coached a youth basketball team on Saturday mornings at the Bexley Recreation Center, not because he had played competitively, but because the kids needed a coach and he lived 2 blocks away. He had not missed a Saturday in 4 years. He was thinking about David Okonkwo's pancreas when the doors did not open for him. Derek Allen Pruitt was 39 years old and had worked hospital security for 11 years, 8 of those at Alderman Medical Center, where he held the title of Senior Security Officer. His personnel file, which would later be subpoenaed in full, was a document of managed negligence. Between 2017 and the morning of October 14, 2023, Derek Pruitt had accumulated 13 formal complaints from hospital staff, patients, and visitors. But 11 of the 13 complaints were filed by black individuals. The other 2 were filed on behalf of black individuals by white companions present at the time of the incidents. The pattern across all 13 complaints was identical. Pruitt had stopped, questioned, detained, or physically redirected black individuals, including employees with visible ID, while allowing white individuals in identical circumstances to pass without challenge. Yet each complaint had been reviewed internally by Alderman's security contractor, Secure First Healthcare Solutions, a private firm operating under a 5-year contract with the hospital. Each complaint had been classified as unsubstantiated or resolved informally. None resulted in written discipline. 2 resulted in what the file called verbal counseling, a term for a conversation that left no paper trail. Whereas Pruitt's supervisors described him in the annual reviews as proactive, vigilant, and results-oriented. He had received a certificate of recognition in 2021 for detaining an individual who had, in fact, stolen equipment from a supply closet. That certificate was posted in the security station break room. It was still there on October 14th. Before Alderman, Pruitt had worked 4 years as a security officer at a large retail complex in Dublin, Ohio. That's where he had been the subject of 6 complaints, 5 from black shoppers, 1 from a black employee. He had resigned from that position before a 7th complaint could be formally processed. The resignation was accepted without disciplinary notation. Secure First hired him 8 months later. No background check uncovered the pattern, because no background check asked the right questions. His partner that morning was Officer Renee Gallagher, 44, with 7 years at Alderman, a woman who had witnessed Pruitt's behavior before and had developed a posture the file would later describe as passive compliance. She was not aggressive. She did not stop him. She did not begin what she was about to witness. His second officer, a 23-year-old named Tyler Moss, 6 months on the job, hired fresh out of a security certification course, was stationed at the interior checkpoint just inside the entrance doors. He had interacted with Dr. Webb twice before in the normal course of the workday. He knew who Marcus Webb was. He would matter later. At 6:44 a.m., Derek Pruitt observed Dr. Marcus Webb walking from the parking structure toward the main entrance of Alderman Medical Center. Dr. Webb was wearing civilian clothes. He was not wearing a visible ID badge. He was carrying a black leather briefcase and a cup of coffee. He was walking at a normal pace. He was not running. He was not shouting. Then he was not doing anything that any other physician, nurse, or administrator arriving for an early shift was not also doing within the same 100-foot radius. Pruitt stepped in front of the entrance doors before Webb reached them. The doors, motion sensor activated, did not open. What followed lasted 9 minutes and 40 seconds. Camera 1, the exterior entrance camera mounted above the main doors, captured the full approach and all subsequent events from a wide-angle perspective. It captured Dr. Webb stopping when Pruitt stepped in front of the doors. It captured Webb placing his briefcase on the ground without being asked. It captured him holding his coffee with both hands visible. It captured him speaking calmly for 45 seconds while Pruitt gestured toward the curb. Camera 2, a secondary camera mounted at the corner of the building facing the entrance at a perpendicular angle, captured Pruitt's face clearly and at close range from approximately 6:46 onward. Camera 3, a personal cell phone camera belonging to Nathaniel Brooks, 66, a retired U.S. Army Staff Sergeant who lived in the medical complex adjacent to the hospital and who walked his dog past the entrance every morning at 6:45, captured the entire incident from the sidewalk, including audio, for 7 minutes and 22 seconds. Brooks, who had served in the Gulf War and recognized what he was watching within the first 30 seconds, did not lower his phone once. Camera 4, the interior checkpoint camera operated by Tyler Moss's station, captured the moment Pruitt physically escalated through the glass doors. Moss's face is visible in this footage. He is not moving. Dr. Webb identified himself 4 times before the physical contact occurred. The first time, "I'm Dr. Marcus Webb. I'm the chief of surgery. My office is on the 5th floor." Pruitt's response, "You don't have a badge." The second time, when Webb reached into his briefcase and produced his hospital ID, his full credentials card with photo, name, title, and department, and held it at eye level. "This is my hospital identification. This is my name, my photo, and my title." Pruitt looked at the card. He looked at Webb. He said, "I'm going to need you to wait right here while I verify." "Verify with whom? The chief of surgery is standing in front of you." "Step back to the curb, sir." The third time, when Officer Gallagher arrived at Pruitt's side and Webb addressed her directly. "Officer, my name is Dr. Marcus Webb. I am the chief of surgery at this hospital. I have a patient in pre-op in 2 hours. I need to go inside. Gallagher looked at the ID card, still in Webb's outstretched hand. She looked at Pruitt. She said nothing. The fourth time came when the main entrance doors slid open briefly as a white male in scrubs exited the building without being stopped. Webb looked at Pruitt, and he said very quietly, "You just let him walk out without checking his badge." Pruitt said, "That's not your concern." Then he said, "You need to calm down." Dr. Webb had not raised his voice once. Audience question. Number 1. At what point would you have stopped being calm? Because he never did. Ask yourself honestly, would you have? What happened next was captured on all 4 cameras simultaneously. Pruitt told Webb he was creating a disturbance and obstructing a secure entrance. Webb said, "I am standing still. I have identified myself 4 times. I am not obstructing anything." He picked up his briefcase. He took 1 step toward the doors. Pruitt grabbed his left arm. Webb turned toward him, not aggressively, in the instinctive way a person turns when grabbed, and Pruitt, with both hands, drove him into the concrete pillar to the left of the entrance doors and then down, to the ground. Dr. Marcus Webb, chief of surgery, 51 years old, with a 9 a.m. resection scheduled, landed on the concrete outside the hospital he ran, on his right shoulder, his coffee shattering beside him, his briefcase skidding 4 feet. He did not fight back. Camera 2 captured Pruitt's face during the takedown, and in that footage, played later, many times, in many rooms, Pruitt can be heard saying, close to Webb's ear as Webb is on the ground, "Stay down. Oh, you people always want to test it." That phrase, captured from 2 angles, camera 2 from the exterior, camera 3 from Nathaniel Brooks's phone. In the grand jury room, a prosecutor would play both angles back to back without comment. Then she would sit down. Then the room would be quiet for a long time. Nathaniel Brooks, retired U.S. Army Staff Sergeant, did not stop filming. He also called 911 and identified himself, his location, and what he was witnessing with the precision of someone who had filed incident reports for 30 years. The second neighbor, Dr. Patricia Anand, 58, an emergency medicine physician who had been Dr. Webb's colleague for 9 years and who had arrived at the entrance moments after the takedown, knelt beside Marcus. She is visible in camera 3 footage. Though she assessed his shoulder with her hands while identifying herself loudly to Pruitt as a physician and telling him he had just assaulted the chief of surgery. Pruitt's response, also on camera, "Ma'am, step back or you'll be detained too." Inside the building, Tyler Moss picked up his radio. The doubling downbeat. At 6:51 a.m., the hospital administrator, Sandra Kim, who had been notified by Tyler Moss's radio call and had run from her office on the 2nd floor, came through the main entrance doors and said to Derek Pruitt outdoors, with Dr. Webb still on the ground, "That is Dr. Marcus Webb. He is the chief of surgery of this hospital. You need to step back right now." Pruitt looked at her. He looked at Webb, now sitting up, right arm held against his chest, shoulder visibly injured. "Nate," he said, "I'm going to need you to let me do my job, ma'am." He did not step back. He had been told who Marcus Webb was, by name and title, by a hospital administrator, with Webb's ID card on the ground beside them. He continued anyway. That moment, that specific documented continuation, is what elevated the subsequent charges from a single incident to a pattern of conduct. Part 4. The Calls. At 6:52 a.m., Sandra Kim called Alderman Medical Center CEO, Dr. Lawrence Boateng. At 6:53 a.m., Dr. Boateng called Secure First Healthcare Solutions Regional Director. At 6:54 a.m., the regional director called Secure First's National Operations Chief. At 6:55 a.m., Dr. Patricia Anand called the Columbus Police Department's non-emergency line and filed a formal witness report. At 6:57 a.m., Nathaniel Brooks uploaded his full, unedited footage to a cloud backup service and emailed a copy to the Columbus Dispatch. Not his daughter, a practicing attorney, and the Ohio Attorney General's public intake line. At 6:58 a.m., Dr. Webb was helped to his feet by Dr. Anand. He asked first about his patient. He asked whether the OR team had been notified. He asked whether David Okonkwo had been told there might be a delay. He asked these things before he asked about his own shoulder. Sandra Kim, who would later testify to this sequence of events, said she had worked in hospital administration for 22 years and had never heard anything like it. The shoulder was a torn rotator cuff. Surgery was required. Recovery took 11 weeks. He missed 17 scheduled surgeries, including David Okonkwo's, which was successfully completed by his first-in-command, Dr. Aisha Grant, whom he had trained. Audience question number 2. When was the last time you asked about someone else's needs before your own after being hurt? Keep that thought, as because this story is about to turn. If this story moved you, you already know what to do. Follow for more stories the mainstream can't file fast enough to cover. Part 5. The False Report. Derek Pruitt filed his incident report at 9:15 a.m. on October 14th. The report stated that an unidentified male had approached the secure entrance in an agitated state, had refused repeated requests to provide identification, had made threatening movements toward this officer, and had been restrained using minimum necessary force to prevent unauthorized access to a secure medical facility. The report did not mention Dr. Webb's name, though Webb had stated it 4 times. Nay, the report did not mention the hospital ID card Webb had produced, though Pruitt had looked directly at it. The report did not mention Dr. Annan's identification of Webb as chief of surgery, though she had said it loudly, outdoors, to Pruitt's face. The report stated that Webb had resisted and attempted to force entry. Officer Gallagher co-signed the report at 10:40 a.m. That night, at 11:08 p.m., Tyler Moss called the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission's complaint intake line. He identified himself, provided his employee number, and requested whistleblower protection under Ohio Revised Code, Section 4113.52, before saying a single additional word. Then, he told them everything. Part 6. The Unraveling. The Columbus Police Department Civil Rights Unit received Nathaniel Brooks's footage at 7:23 a.m., before Pruitt had filed his report. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation was assigned jurisdiction by noon. By 3 p.m. on October 14th, and investigators had obtained all 4 camera feeds, synchronized them to a single timeline, and laid that timeline against Pruitt's report, line by line. The results. The report said Webb refused repeated requests to provide identification. The footage showed Webb producing his ID card at 6:46:12 a.m., and holding it at eye level for 41 consecutive seconds. The report said Webb made threatening movements. 4 camera angles, 0 threatening movements, 0. The report said minimum necessary force. A 51-year-old man with no weapon, no threatening behavior, and 4 verbal identifications of himself was driven into a concrete pillar and brought to the ground. A orthopedic surgeon's assessment of the resulting injury described it as consistent with a high-force impact to a stationary individual. The report said unauthorized access. Marcus Webb had authorized access. His photo was on a badge that Pruitt had personally examined. As senior BCI investigator Carol Ewan, who had been with the Bureau for 19 years, reviewed all materials and wrote the following sentence in her summary, which would be quoted in every subsequent legal filing, every civil complaint, and read into the record at trial. The subject of this report had the legal right, professional authority, and documented credentials to enter the building, and the responding officer had the evidence of all 3 in his hand and proceeded anyway. Part 7. Criminal Proceedings. Derek Allen Pruitt was indicted on November 19, 2023, by a Franklin County grand jury on the following counts: 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law; 18 U.S.C. Section 111, forcible assault of an individual in performance of federal-funded duties. Alderman Medical Center received federal Medicare/Medicaid reimbursements, or placing the facility and its authorized personnel under federal protection. 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, making false statements to investigators, the incident report co-signed. Ohio Revised Code, Section 2921.0. 3. Intimidation of a witness, a separate charge related to pressure applied to Gallagher before the report was filed. Pruitt declined a plea agreement twice, and as his attorneys argued the footage was contextually incomplete and that his actions fell within the reasonable discretion afforded security personnel, he took the stand in his own defense. Under cross-examination, he was asked to watch camera 2 footage of himself saying, "You people always want to test it," and asked directly, "Did you say those words?" He said, "I may have said something. I don't recall the specific phrasing." The prosecutor played it again, then a third time. Does hearing it 3 times help your recollection?" I was under stress. Dr. Webb was on the ground. Who was under stress? The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 11 minutes. They returned guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing, the Honorable Judge Denise Okafor addressed Derek Pruitt directly. You did not make a mistake in a difficult situation. You made a choice in a clear one. You saw a black man, and you decided, before he spoke a word, like what category of person he was and what rights he was therefore entitled to. Every piece of evidence that contradicted that decision, his words, his identification, his credential, the testimony of his colleagues, you overrode. This court cannot give back Dr. Webb his 11 weeks, his surgeries, or the particular kind of wound that does not appear on any imaging. What this court can do is make certain you never hold authority over another person again. Derek Pruitt was sentenced to 44 months in federal prison. His security license was permanently revoked. A lifetime bar from employment in any law enforcement, security, or public safety capacity was entered as a condition of supervised release. Officer Renee Gallagher pleaded guilty to a single count of filing a false official report. She received 18 months probation, a $12,000 fine, and was permanently barred from licensed security work in Ohio. Tyler Moss received full prosecutorial immunity. He was commended in writing by the Ohio Attorney General. He transferred to a position with the hospital's internal compliance office, a role created in part because of what he had witnessed and reported. He was 23 years old. That Secure First Healthcare Solutions regional director received a formal letter of censure from the company's national board and was quietly reassigned. The national operations chief resigned in January 2024 before a planned deposition in the civil case. Part 8. The Civil Settlement. On March 7, 2024, Alderman Medical Center and Secure First Healthcare Solutions jointly settled the civil suit filed by Dr. Marcus Elijah Webb, and settlement amount $2.7 million. The settlement was described in the plaintiff's attorney's public statement as one of the largest security-related civil settlements in Ohio hospital history. Mandatory reforms attached to the settlement agreement. 1. Independent Credential Verification Protocol. All security personnel at Alderman must verify employee identity through the hospital's internal system before any physical engagement, regardless of visible badge status. 2. A Civilian Oversight Board for Security Operations. A 5-member board, including 2 community members, 1 physician, 1 patient advocate, and 1 civil rights attorney, empowered to review all use of force incidents quarterly. 3. External bias. Review annual third-party audit of all security complaint records, with mandatory public summary report filed with the hospital's board of directors. 4. Its Secure First National Protocol change. A specific clause requiring Secure First to implement identical independent verification procedures at all 67 of its hospital contracts nationwide. A reform affecting over 200,000 daily encounters between security personnel and hospital visitors. 5. Named officer background check. Standard, all secure. First hiring now requires direct contact with previous employers and formal inquiry into any complaint history, also regardless of disciplinary notation. Part 9. What became of everyone? Derek Pruitt reported to federal custody on April 22, 2024. His pension from Secure First, he was vested for partial benefits, was forfeited under the terms of the criminal conviction. His wife filed for divorce while the civil case was pending. His adult son, in a statement he gave to the Columbus Dispatch that was published the day of sentencing, said, "I don't know what he thought he was doing. I don't know how to explain him." That statement ran beside a photo of Dr. Webb's hospital entrance. Renee Gallagher completed her probationary period. She gave a deposition in the civil case in which she said, under oath, "I knew who he was. I saw the badge. I didn't say anything." She now works in retail management. She has not sought relicensure in security. Tyler Moss was promoted to Senior Compliance Analyst at Alderman in February 2025. At the ceremony where the hospital announced its new independent oversight board, he sat in the 3rd row. When Dr. Webb spotted him and nodded across the room, Moss looked briefly like a person who had been waiting for that nod for a long time. Nathaniel Brooks, retired U.S. Army Staff Sergeant, early morning dog walker, was honored by name at Alderman Medical Center's annual community recognition ceremony in April 2024. The hospital gave him a formal letter of commendation signed by the entire board of directors. He attended with his wife and his dog. He said, when asked to say a few words, "I was just walking by, but you have to not just walk by." Dr. Patricia Anand, emergency medicine physician, colleague of 17 years, was similarly honored. In her remarks, she said, "Marcus Webb did not need me to tell them who he was. He had already told them, and I said it because silence was not an option." Secure First Healthcare Solutions lost 4 hospital contracts in the 6 months following the settlement. Their national CEO gave a statement acknowledging institutional failures in training and oversight. Their stock dropped 11% in a single trading session when the settlement amount was announced. They are currently under a compliance audit by 3 state attorneys general. Dr. Lawrence Boateng, Alderman CEO, who made the right calls in the right order on the morning of October 14th, received no formal consequence. He has publicly said in multiple forums that the incident represents the single greatest institutional failure of his tenure and that he considers its correction the defining work of whatever time I have left in this role. Dr. Marcus Elijah Webb returned to his role as Chief of Surgery at Alderman Medical Center on January 6, 2025. Then 11 weeks after the incident, following the completion of his surgical rehabilitation, David Okonkwo, whose surgery had been performed successfully by Dr. Aisha Grant while Webb recovered, sent him a handwritten card that week. Webb keeps it in his desk drawer. He returned to his Saturday basketball coaching the week after he returned to the OR. His team had held practice without him for 11 Saturdays, coached on a rotating basis by parents from the neighborhood. Yeah, they had gone 6-5 without him. He told them, at the first practice back, that he was proud of them, and that 6-5 was exactly the record he would have expected. There is one thing that changed. He now wears his hospital ED badge clipped to his coat when he walks from his car to the entrance. Not because the hospital requires it, not because anything requires it. He has thought about why he does this, whether it is accommodation or whether it is something else. He told his daughter Imani, Eddie, the law student, over the phone one Sunday that he hadn't decided yet. He said, "Maybe I'm just tired of the test, or maybe I'm making sure no one else has to pass it on my behalf." She said, "Daddy, that's 2 different things." He said, "I know, I'm still figuring out which one it is." Part 10. Closing Statement. Dr. Marcus Webb gave one public statement. He delivered it at a press conference on March 8, 2024, the day after the settlement was announced. He spoke for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. He did not use notes. He thanked his wife, Diane. He thanked his daughter. He thanked Dr. Anand and Nathaniel Brooks by name. He thanked Tyler Moss, who he said had displayed the most difficult kind of courage, the kind where you have to find it alone, in the middle of the night, with no guarantee anyone will believe you. He said that he had spent 11 weeks thinking about what he wanted to say, and that most of what he had thought was too angry to be useful. He said that anger was legitimate. He said that his own anger was legitimate. He said he was not going to pretend otherwise, because the people who had been in that situation before him, whose names he knew, whose cases he had read, deserved honesty about what it costs. He said, "I keep being asked what I want people to take from this, and the answer I keep coming back to is not about me. I had resources. I had witnesses. And I had 4 cameras. I had a colleague who stayed. I had a young man who made a phone call in the dark. Most people who have what happened to me do not have all of those things. And the ones who don't, we don't always know their names. We don't always get to hear how their story ends." He paused. "The reforms in this settlement are not a favor to me. They are the floor. They are what should have existed before October 14th. They are what should exist in every hospital, every building, every institution where someone in a uniform has the power to decide who belongs and who doesn't." He looked for a moment down at the lectern. "I have been a surgeon for 23 years. I have spent my career working in the gap between what the body is and what it can be, between damage and recovery, between the injury and the return to function. That is the work. That is always the work. What happened to me was wrong. What happened to the people before me was wrong. And I am standing here today not because I have found peace with that, and not because the system worked the way it was supposed to." He looked up. "I am standing here because it was witnessed, because it was documented, because people with nothing to gain refused to look away, because a 23-year-old made a phone call, because a retired soldier kept filming. That is not justice. And then, finally, that is what justice requires of us, before we can even begin to ask for it. That final line was quoted in a 12-year-old's essay submitted to the Ohio State Bar Association's Youth Civic Writing Competition in 2025. It won. It appears on slide 4 of the updated Secure First Healthcare Solutions Mandatory Bias Training module. It deployed to 11,000 security personnel nationwide. It is engraved on a small plaque mounted beside the main entrance doors of Alderman Medical Center at eye level, paid for privately by the hospital's board of directors. It reads, "That is what justice requires of us, before we can even begin to ask for it." Dr. Marcus Elijah Webb, March 8, 2024. Doctor. Webb walks past it every morning. He has never stopped to read it. He already knows what it says. The end word count. Approximately 4,800 words. All characters, institutions, and case details in this narrative are fictional and created for dramatic and educational purposes.